Hi again, Leo Demetrio here from Let It Spin. And joining me again today, resident music guru Martin Fawkes.
Howdy.
And 45 RPM radio show presenter Wes J.
Hey, howdy, y'all.
Yep, we're proud to be based in the Geelong region in Victoria, Australia, and we just want to thank you for checking us out today. And today we'll be focusing on our top 5 favourite cover songs of all time. Recently, we've seen several renowned singer-songwriters turn to releasing albums featuring cover versions of, for example, American standards. Rod Stewart and Bob Dylan come to mind, and pop, rock and soul classics. And the examples there, Bruce Springsteen with his Only the Strong Survive album, and our very own Richard Clapton with Music Is Love, where he focuses on flower power, love music from the years 66 to 1970, probably some of the best years in music for sure. We'll be specifically looking at tracks that were substantially different to the originals, where the artist or band made the song their very own, and we love it as much or even more than the original. So, Martin, let's start off with you. Let's have a crack at what your impressions are,
Sure.
first of all.
So just speaking generically, just to start with, you've identified that what resonates with me as far as cover versions go, it's something where the artist makes it their own. So when Tom Jones appeared with The Art of Noise covering Prince's Kiss, it wasn't much of a departure from Prince's version. So I'm kind of like, well, you know, what's the value of this? And there was a very important value, which was it brought Tom Jones back into the spotlight as far as the mass market was concerned. So thank you for that, Tom. Thank you, Prince. Thank you, Art of Noise. So, yeah, I want to validate that for sure. We think of Bob Dylan, you know, one of the most covered artists of all time, maybe next to or behind the Beatles. Blowing in the Wind, how many versions of that? So I had a look on a website called secondhandsongs.com. 390 cover versions of Blowing in the Wind that they have identified. So you listen to Joan Baez and you listen to Peter, Paul and Mary and Jackie DeShannon and everybody else. I would argue that people aren't necessarily reinterpreting that song and making it their own. They're just singing a powerful song. So for their own followers, it's good. You know, if they're releasing it as a single and Bob hadn't released it as a single, then that's good. You know, it's but why dig too deep when you can go back to Bob himself, as far as historical works are concerned. Something I found interesting, we know Betty Davis Eyes by King Carnes. I found the original version from the person who wrote it, Jackie DeShannon, and she sings it like a swing tune. So straight ahead pop. It hasn't got all that production and all that heavily chorused guitars so her version wasn't well known, but when King Carnes found it and re-recorded it, she did a drastic overhaul and reinterpretation and really made that something of her own. So, yeah, great stuff. And I guess that's what we're digging into.
Yep, definitely, Martin. What's your number 5 all-time favourite?
Okay. Subtle reinvention, probably rather than overhaul, but I'm going to say Black Magic Woman by Santana, as originally written by Peter Green and recorded by Fleetwood Mac in the early days. Santana just put the Latin feel and just made it a bit more languid and a bit more smooth, filed off some of the rough edges and made a bit of a classic out of that. Both versions well worth hearing.
Excellent.
That's my number 5.
Cool. Over to you, Wes, for your number 5.
My number 5 is really, I'm going to cheat a little bit here because it's a Carl Perkins tune and great guitar player and the rest. And he did this amazing version, well, he wrote it, of Bop and the Blues. But there's this Australian band which did Bop and the Blues. And for many years, I was going, oh, Black Feather, how incredible that they've come up with a song like this. It must have been 30 or 40 years later that I realized from the credits on the Infinity 45 that it was actually Carl Perkins. So I'm going to go with my number 5, an Aussie track, Black Feather, Bop and the Blues.
Fantastic. Yeah, great version, that one. My number 5 was originally written by, well, it was written by Jerry Goffin and Carole King, originally recorded in June of 1962 by probably a one-hit wonder, because I haven't heard much of her other stuff. A great song by Little Eva. And that one is The Locomotion. For those of you who are familiar with it, I certainly am. And I think the cover of The Locomotion is one of my favourite songs by Grand Funk Railroad, released in February 1974. Got to number 1 in the US and top 5 here in Australia. And yeah, I still love listening to it, The Locomotion by Grand Funk Railroad. Very cool indeed. And it's, you should have been miming my lips, Martin, as the camera was still on you.
Oh, yeah, I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that. Whatever. I didn't know what you were going to say. So
back to you, mate, for your number 4.
All righty. Here's one slightly out of left field. An Aussie act called Frente covered New Order's song Bizarre Love Triangle. And so basically electro pop kind of thing in the New Order version, but an acoustic lament in the Frente version. And Angie Hart just emoting beautifully.
Yeah, such a beautiful song. That was one that I was considering in my top 5.
Wow.
Beautiful. Where's your number 4?
I think it's worth asking the question, why do people record covers? And, part of it is what Martin was talking about earlier. But it's also a wonderful thing to have to go on the road, particularly if you're a new artist or you're wanting to expand the area of influence. Like we're talking earlier about, people doing things like Blowing in the Wind. Stevie Wonder did a version of that. And that was an opportunity for him to take a Bob Dylan song and take that into the African community of America. And then, so when you start to look at it, there's often some marketing or some strategic reason behind what different people did. For example, Aretha Franklin took my number 4 song, which is a Beatles track of Eleanor Rigby. And her version of that, boy, did she ever make that her own. It's like she's Eleanor Rigby, or that she knew Eleanor Rigby. And it's just a wonderful soul classic. And you just see another side of what the Beatles were referring to. And then, of course, there's this other cover, which we know infamously as the Zoot version of that song. We're talking earlier about, well, where did that Zoot version come from of Eleanor Rigby? I've suggested that it's come from House of the Rising Sun, which is another cover, which is not in my top 5. A group called Frigid Pink covered that. Of course, it was Bob Dylan and also so many other people. A traditional track, and the Animals did it, of course. And the Frigid Pink put it out in February of 1970, and Zoot put it out in December 1970. So I'm suggesting that one of the reasons why Zoot did it is they heard the cover of the Frigid Pink thing.
So the acid rock interpretation of a traditional song, or another song,
And then I go, well, that's great. There's the soul one of Aretha, and of course there's so many instrumental versions too of Eleanor Rigby. So that's my number 4.
Would that be Aretha's version or Zoot's version? That's number 4.
Look, I can't
Just
separate.
Eleanor Rigby, was it? Okay, it's a draw.
4A,
Look,
4A and 4B.
Yeah, let's do 4A and 4B. Look, they're
right.
just so darn good. And
Yep.
both were hits in Australia.
Yep,
Yeah.
perfect. My number 4, a song, another Bob Dylan song. And boy, this one's been covered many, many times. Bob Dylan recorded it in December of 62 and released it on his Free Will and Bob Dylan album in May of 1963. A very, very poignant song that Brian Ferry covered in 1973 in September. But my cover of that particular song, which is A Hard Rains Are Gonna Fall, is Leon Russell's version in 1971. I just love it.
Oh, tasteful.
Oh, the song just lopes along. You've got Leon Russell's incredible piano playing, his tasty piano work there, and also that southern gospel drawl of his that just adds that poignancy to the song. I just love it. Leon Russell, A Hard Rains Are Gonna Fall is my number 4. Martin, back to you, number 3.
All righty. I'm going to take a leaf out of Wes's book, and I'm going to pick a song and the various versions. I'm not going to say which one is the best version because I think they all have something intriguing to offer, and that is a song that was originally called Groupie, but the Carpenters re-recorded it and called it Superstar. And it was written by Bonnie from Delaney and Bonnie Bramlett. So Bonnie Bramlett wrote the song based on her observation of some of the hangers-on at the music concerts, hangers-on, shall we call them, people who attach themselves to the rock stars. And she wrote the song with Leon Russell. So the Delaney and Bonnie version is exquisite. Just her voice, if you've never heard it, track it down, find out. Carpenters, we know Karen Carpenter's voice, again, exquisite. Sanitized a particular word so that it's not expressing a desire to sleep together so much as to be together. It was performed on the Mad Dogs and Englishmen tour by Rita Coolidge, who was the backing singer on the Delaney and Bonnie version. But Richard Carpenter heard the song and decided to record it with his sister after seeing Bette Midler perform it on one of the Tonight shows. And indeed, it's on the album To Divine Miss M. And she sings it not as a powerful ballad so much as a torch song. So it's a slower pace. So all of those versions have something to recommend them. And look it up. Groupie, Superstar, one or the other.
Cool.
Colleen Hewitt had a version too, which charted.
Yeah, that's
Wow.
right. Yep. Where's your number 3?
My number 3 is a song made famous originally by John Fogerty, Creedence Clearwater Revival. And again, I'm going for multiple versions because, not because I can't decide, but because they're exquisite and they're slightly different. And both of them are hits in their own way. Solomon Burke was soul singer out of, I think, Atlantic Records. He did this version of Proud Mary, or maybe it was Belle, come to think of it. And he did extremely well and just made that. It starts off with the monologue, that we're all proud about riding on this boat, called the Proud Mary. And this monologue idea is also taken up by Ike and Tina Turner, who do a short radio single, but also an extended 7-minute version or certainly in that vicinity of Proud Mary. And Tina comes on and introduces it, we're going to do it slow, and then we're going to do it rough. So there's a bit of sexual analogy and, intensity going
No,
on in
no
that.
kidding.
And that just generates that whole song. So that's my number 3. I can't make up my mind, Solomon Burke or Ike and Tina Turner, but it's Proud Mary just rolling down the river, I tell you.
Brilliant. Good stuff, Wes. My number 3 is a cover of an Elvis song, believe it or not. I love this song by Elvis. It was the title of one of his movies. It was released as a single on February 10, 1964. It got to number 12 in the US and top 10 here in Australia, and it's called Kissin' Cousins. And I love the song. It's a great pop rock song, and Elvis does it exquisitely. But I found a version back in 1977 when I bought the album by the Saints, a punk rock version.
Yes, it's awesome.
It is fantastic, and I've loved it ever since I first heard it. I love both versions, but the Saints just get that little bit of a nudge in front, in my opinion, and it's a 2-minute jolt to the head, basically, and I love it. Kissin' Cousins by the Saints from I'm Stranded from 1977.
They'd never be able to record that now, though, could they?
No, not at all.
A PC would take over.
Correct. Yep. Martin, you're number 2?
Okay. I'm not terribly familiar with the original version of this, but it's from a covers album by David Bowie called Pin-Ups. And having listened to that and listening to the various covers that he did, I didn't think it was a terribly well-produced record. To me, it seemed like something he was putting out to generate some cash to pay for the next record. Maybe, I don't know. But the song that was out as a single, I thought was amazing, and that's his version of the McCoys' hit "Sorrow." David Bowie. Love the saxophone, love the harmonies, just the very subtle keyboards that are happening in there. Beautiful.
Yeah, it's an excellent album. He also did some stuff for the Pretty Things, and just really good stuff. He was trying to honour all the people that, or some of the people that had influenced him.
Yeah, he did the Easy Beats Friday on My Mind.
Yes.
Yep, one of my favourite covers albums of all time, definitely Pin-Ups by David Bowie.
Yeah.
Your number 2, Wes?
Well, once again, I'm cheating a bit, and I'm going, with the hand in both pockets. It's a Beatles tune again, and I love Beatles. And there's this version by Sergio Mendes in the Brazil 66. Now, they did a number of songs which were Beatle covers, and they did Day Tripper for one and had a hit with that. They also had just Simon Garfunkel covers as well, but the version of With a Little Help from My Friends by Sergio Mendes in the Brazil 66 is just so light and fluffy that it just, like Ringo's version is, pretty intense, but it's not as intense as Joe Cocker, who just really owns that song. So I think Sergio Mendes, come at it with a very playful approach. And then, of course, Joe Cocker just nails it in a way that I've never heard a cover version before. So that's my number 2, Joe Cocker and Sergio Mendes on With a Little Help from My Friends.
Fantastic. My number 2, another Bob Dylan song covered. A song Bob Dylan originally recorded on his John Wesley Harding album back in December 67. It was covered 9 months later, released 9 months later by Jimi Hendrix. Made the US top 20, and that's All Along the Watchtower. What a magnificent cover that is. It's one of my all-time favorites. It's Hendrix at his best and most creative. Great guitar work, magnificent vocals. I couldn't ask for much more. All Along the Watchtower, Jimi Hendrix.
Agreed.
Yep. So we'll go to you, Martin, for your number one.
Well, before we get to number one, why don't we have a look at, maybe some of the also-rans or the, let's not include those. So in my research, I uncovered it wasn't a Bob Dylan song that Bob Dylan wrote, but it's a Bob Dylan song about Bob Dylan, I'm assuming. Diamonds and Rust, written by Joan Baez. And her version is absolutely harrowing, heart on its sleeve, confessional. And there is no question it's a brilliantly written song, but I'm like, ow, this is almost painful to hear. And then I discover there's a cover version by the heavy metal band Judas Priest. It's like, well, let's see how much emotion they put into it. And it is flat, badly produced, vanilla. I'm just not feeling a thing. And please don't lynch me, Judas Priest fans. But that isn't the one that I'm going to diss, although I just did. My least favourite cover that I have discovered. No, it's actually not a cover. It's the original version of Galveston, written by Jimmy Webb, before the absolutely beautiful version that we know from Glenn Campbell. The Hawaiian singer Don Ho got a hold of it. And Don's singing style, he's a beautiful singer, but his style is very, very languid and relaxed, to the point where you're wondering where the pulse of the song is. He is so behind the beat, and so here I am. You weren't quite expecting it there. And I'm like, where's the pulse? Where's the rhythm? So to hear Glenn sing it is just absolute honey in comparison. So Don Ho, sorry, Don. So apparently the story is he put it out as a single, didn't get anywhere. So he was catching up with his friend Glenn and said, Glenn, I'll try to make something of this and it didn't work. Maybe you can do better. So Glenn Campbell took it and the rest is history.
Fantastic. Wes, have you got a dishonourable mention up your sleeve?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. A favourite song in the past was Petula Clark. And she did this piece called Downtown, a really well-known piece.
Yes.
But there's this horrible, horrible, horrible piece by Mrs. Miller.
Oh, Mrs. Miller.
Yeah, and not to be confused with the geriatric Mrs. Mills, but this is Mrs. Miller, and who can you imagine gee, I'm going to be poking a bit of fun of myself here. Can you imagine a 70 or 80-year-old female, sorry, oldies, with finding real difficulty holding a note, let's put it like that, and go, oh, did all this already? Oh, terrible stuff. I'm not even going to do that, but you go and find Mrs. Miller doing Downtown.
I think Borders might have used that song at midnight to clear the store. I'd put it on over the PA at top volume so everyone would leave, and I wanted to shut their bookstore at midnight. Or maybe that was Cliff Richard. I'm not sure.
Wes, did that Mrs. Miller song actually chart in Australia?
Oh, I hope not.
Yeah,
but it certainly got some airplay.
Yeah,
must have been 2UW or 2UE or something like that.
Wow.
And they must have. The funny thing about radio stations back in the 1960s is that they would often publish longer lists of predictions than what was on their top 30 or top 40. And
Wow.
So you look at the early 2UE top 40s, there's over 100 songs on the prediction list.
Gee.
Doesn't mean they play them all, but terrible. I mean, it reminds me of a radio station that I worked for once, and they had this really long 300 high rotation playlist, and I just couldn't believe it. Fortunately, we had some changes in my first 3 weeks of working there, and I chopped it down to 40 after that.
Fair enough.
But even today, that would be regarded as too much.
Oh yeah.
About 6 or 10 high rotation songs is all you need today.
Incredible.
So, Mrs. Miller,
Yep. I have to
Alan
get into
Sherman
that.
did a nice send-up of the song called Crazy Downtown. That's probably in the same boat.
Was she in the same mold as Tiny Tim, do you think?
Yeah, obviously. But the difference was Tiny Tim could at least play, and he was great friends with George Harrison. And I suspect that if it wasn't for that friendship with George Harrison and the Beatles, nobody would have taken too much notice of Tiny Tim.
What do you make of his cover of Highway to Hell?
I actually haven't heard it.
Oh. Have a listen. It's not bad, actually. Not bad at all.
God rest his soul.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I hate to kick an Aussie band, but I just thought of a dishonourable mention by one of my favourite Aussie bands, Sherbet. And they did a cover of Elvis or Big Mama Thornton's Hound Dog. And it was released as a single as well. So that irked me even more because it was getting airplay here in Australia. And every time I heard it, I cringed, I vomited. It was just one of those songs that I just couldn't.
Because you're a fan. You're a fan, aren't you? You're a Sherbet fan.
I am a Sherbet fan, and I'm also an Elvis fan, and I love Big Mama Thornton's version. And I couldn't relate to what Sherbet did to that song. And still, every time I think of it, I cringe, and I had to bring it out today. But to those who are linked to Sherbet, I love the band, except for that.
Look, I actually think that, that's the case of covers being very functional. And you put a song in your set just to get everybody in the audience to sing along with what you're doing, and also to just break everything up. So I think they're more to do with concerts. And occasionally some of those songs come across and get released on albums and 45s. But I don't think they're ever intentional there. They just become fan favorites, no matter how good or bad the version they do is. And it's like, hey, we need a song to sing along with.
Yeah, good point.
You raise an interesting point there, Wes. A friend of mine went to see a relatively high-profile English hard rock band that were touring Australia recently. And he said just the showmanship was incredible. The performances were amazing. Just wasn't one hit after another. And so during the show, the hits that they've had were interspersed with not so well-known songs. And he said, look, it was a great night out, but it just wasn't the exceptional night that it would have been if they'd had, 10, 15 hits in a row that they could trot out. And as you say, for a group or an artist that maybe has some songs that they're known for, but not a huge catalogue of it, doing a cover is a way of lighting up the room, not at their own expense. It's yeah.
Yeah, I still ask the question, what was Sherbet thinking releasing it as a 45? But
anyway, record company. It was a record company.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, Martin, we'll go back to you for your number one cover of all time.
Oh man, what a hard choice. I mean, you've already mentioned Brian Ferry's Hard Rain's Gonna Fall, which is amazing, and Hendrix reinterpretation of All Along the Watchtower, amazing. But I've gone to Rod Stewart, someone who's known for his covers. So First Cut Is the Deepest, Have I Told You Lately That I Love You, I Don't Want to Talk About It, Reason to Believe, Maybe I'm Amazed. So he's done some amazing covers over the years. One that I think he really transformed was the Sutherland Brothers song Sailing from his Atlantic Crossing album. And of course, a big hit in Australia. And you can just imagine somebody with lots of money out in the sunlight on their yacht, just relaxed, having the calmest time ever. But the original Sutherland Brothers song is more like a merchant seafarer who's living a bit of a hard life, and it's a bit of a drudge. So it's really got this sea shanty feel about it. So it's really the other side of the coin of Rod Stewart's interpretation. And I did read might have been Ram magazine or Juke magazine back in the day, they asked Gavin Sutherland, who wrote the song, what he felt of Rod Stewart's cover, and he said, I think he ruined it. And he might have been being facetious, I'm not sure. But it's certainly drastically different interpretation. So good on you, Rod, and a beautiful song, Sailing.
Good stuff. Where's your number one?
Well, I want to go with Hendrix doing All Along the Watchtower, but it's been mentioned, so it's like, well, I'm not going to mention that then, even though I think it's absolutely stunning. So I'm going to go with something unusual, just like the Rod Stewart track was unusual. And I'm going to go with Chris Barlow, and a guy who did a lot of covers of Rolling Stones tunes. In fact, he was kind of like getting the second runs of Mick Jagger and Keith Richards tunes. And so Out of Time is the tune that I'm thinking is my favourite cover from that era. So Out of Time, which we are.
Cool. My number one has been mentioned by you, Wes, but I'll stick to that as my number one because I love it. And it's Eleanor Rigby by Zoot. And this song is amazing. It was recorded, it was released as a single in December 1970, charted throughout its life in 1971. Made number 3 in Sydney, number 3 in Melbourne, number 1 in Brisbane, number 3 in Adelaide, and top 10 in Perth, number 4 nationally. What a great song. What a great interpretation of that Beatles classic. The Beatles song was actually released in August of '66 as a double A side with Yellow Submarine, and of course that got to number 1. But that was the first version I heard, the Zoot version, and I just thought this is fantastic, and it sort of got me into enjoying the heavier side of music. I was only like 12 when it came out, and I thought, this is what I like. I really like this stuff, and it got me into bands like Deep Purple, Alice Cooper, etc. And I still love this version. Since I heard the Beatles version, which was not too long after I heard the Zoot version, I love the Beatles version a lot, but I still prefer the Zoot version. So my number 1 is Eleanor Rigby by Zoot. Boys, have you got any honourable mentions that you haven't, that didn't quite make your top 5?
Certainly. A song by the Specials from the UK, and their contribution was to change the order of the title. So the original version by Dandy Livingstone was called Rudy, A Message to You, and the Specials version, A Message to You, Rudy. And I don't even know if the songs are that dissimilar arrangement-wise, but just something out of left field to hear that on the radio, that very rootsy ska, beautiful, love it.
Great. Wes, have you got one at all? Any honourable?
The Marvin Gaye tune, I heard it through the grapevine. Originally a massive hit for Gladys Knight and the Pips in the US, and did nothing here. And to be honest, except in, I think, Victoria, I heard it through the grapevine, did nothing at all. Got a bit of airplay until the 80s when the Big Chill came along. And then, of course, that and the Temptations song, My Girl, were part of that. But I love, I heard it through the grapevine by Marvin Gaye. I just think that is such a beautiful, smooth performance, and just stunning.
Well, I guess my honourable mention, Wes, say on the lines of what you were saying, is the Creedence version. I heard it through the grapevine.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's one of those, just that laid-back style again, which I really like, which was highlighted by Leon Russell earlier. Just that long, drawn-out dirge, virtually, of that particular song, and I just love it. I remember one of the first party I ever went to as a 12-year-old. They put on Cosmo's Factory. I didn't know anything about it, and this song came on, and I was just transfixed. And I still love that song. Fantastic version by Creedence.
11 minutes long.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Well, I think that sums everything up, boys. Thank you. Thank you guys for checking us out. Please check out the link to where you can find the latest 45 RPM program, as well as Wes's previous shows. Excellent value and top notch. And please add your comment by letting us know what your top 5 covers are. Be interested to see if there's any interesting covers from your perspective. So we hope you enjoyed today's offering. And if so, we'd love it if you can give us a thumbs up and to subscribe to Let It Spin. So we'll see you guys next time. Cheers.